It's just heavy rock to me, because I never felt comfortable with the phrasing of heavy metal, because it doesn't have any musical connotations. Heavy rock would be better.
It's 1972, and Ozzy Osbourne is about to have the most terrifying encounter of his life. He's standing backstage at a venue in Los Angeles, sweating through his leather jacket, coming down from whatever cocktail of substances got him through Black Sabbath's set that night. The band is still nobody in America. They're the opening act, the weird British guys with the scary music that makes parents lock their doors. And that's when someone taps him on the shoulder and says the words that will change everything. Elvis wants to meet you. Now, you have to understand what this meant to Ozzy in 1972. This wasn't just meeting a celebrity, this was meeting God. Elvis Presley was the reason Ozzy picked up a microphone in the first place. Growing up dirt poor in Birmingham, England, Elvis was the impossible dream, the working-class kid who became royalty. Elvis was everything Ozzy thought he could never be: confident, charismatic, beloved by millions. So when they lead Ozzy through those backstage corridors toward Elvis's dressing room, he's not walking, he's floating in a panic-induced haze. His bandmates are nowhere to be found. He's alone, strung out, and about to meet his childhood hero looking like he just crawled out of a cemetery. The door opens, and there's Elvis Presley in all his 1970s glory. The jumpsuit, the jewelry, the presence that filled every room he entered. But here's what nobody talks about. Elvis took one look at Ozzy and immediately knew exactly who he was dealing with. "You're that singer from the Devil Band," Elvis says, and Ozzy's heart stops. This is it. His hero is about to tear him apart, call him a fraud, maybe even throw him out. Elvis Presley, the most beloved entertainer in the world, is face to face with Ozzy Osbourne, the guy parents warned their kids about. But then Elvis does something completely unexpected. He starts laughing. Not mocking laughter, genuine, warm laughter. "The thing is," Elvis says, leaning forward, "when you get up there on that stage, you can't fake it. The audience knows. They always know. You think you're fooling them with the costume and the moves, but what they're really connecting with is your pain. That's the secret nobody tells you." Ozzy's mind is racing. Here's Elvis Presley, explaining that the very thing that made him legendary, that raw, emotional connection with his audience, came from the same dark place that was destroying him. "You and your band," Elvis continues, "you're doing something I never had the guts to do. You're putting the darkness right out front. You're not pretending it doesn't exist. That's honest. That's real." The conversation goes on for maybe 20 minutes, but for Ozzy, it feels like hours. Elvis is treating him like an equal, like a fellow traveler on this impossible journey of being a performer. The king is sharing secrets with the Prince of Darkness, and neither of them fully understands what they're creating in that moment. Then Elvis stands up, the conversation clearly over. But before Ozzy leaves, Elvis grabs his arm and says something that will echo in Ozzy's head for the next 50 years. "Don't let them clean you up, son. The world's got enough pretty boys. What it needs is someone willing to show them the truth, even when the truth is ugly. Especially when it's ugly." As Ozzy walks out of that dressing room, his legs barely working, he doesn't realize that Elvis Presley has just handed him the key to everything. Not just success, survival. The blueprint for turning pain into power, darkness into connection, honesty into legend. But Elvis's advice came with a hidden cost that would nearly destroy Ozzy before it saved him. Because taking that kind of emotional honesty to its extreme doesn't just change your career, it changes your soul. And Ozzy was about to learn exactly what that meant. What happened in that dressing room wasn't just a casual meeting between two musicians. Elvis Presley recognized something in Ozzy Osbourne that night. But here's where it gets deeper. When Elvis exploded onto the scene in the 1950s, he wasn't just changing music, he was terrifying America. Parents literally thought he was corrupting their children. Ministers preached against him. The FBI kept files on him. Sound familiar? 20 years later, Ozzy and Black Sabbath were getting the exact same treatment. Parents burning their records, religious groups calling them satanic, authority figures trying to shut them down. Both Elvis and Ozzy had become symbols of everything that scared the establishment. Elvis recognized that connection immediately. He saw in Ozzy the same desperate hunger that had driven him to Sun Records as a teenager. The same need to connect with audiences on a level that went deeper than entertainment. Something primal, something real. "You know what the problem is with this business?" Elvis had told Ozzy that night. "They want to turn you into a product. They want to package your pain, make it pretty, make it safe. But the moment you do that, you lose the only thing that made you special in the first place." Elvis understood something about performance that most artists never figure out. The audience isn't just buying your music, they're buying your vulnerability. They're connecting with your struggles, your fears, your humanity. And both Elvis and Ozzy had more of those struggles than most people could handle. Elvis had been dealing with the crushing weight of fame since he was 21 years old. By 1972, he was trapped in Vegas, doing the same show night after night, surrounded by people who only told him what he wanted to hear. He was isolated, medicated, and slowly dying inside the very success he'd worked so hard to achieve. But when he looked at Ozzy, he saw something he'd lost: authenticity. Raw, unfiltered, dangerous authenticity. Ozzy wasn't trying to be palatable. He wasn't trying to make parents comfortable. He was willing to be genuinely frightening, genuinely dark. "You're going to face a choice," Elvis warned Ozzy. "The bigger you get, the more they're going to want to change you. They'll offer you everything: money, movies, respectability. And every time you say yes to making it easier, you lose a piece of what made you matter in the first place." Elvis was speaking from experience. He'd made those compromises. He'd taken the movie deals, followed the formula, let Colonel Parker turn him into a brand. And while it made him the biggest star in the world, it also slowly strangled his artistic soul. But here's what Elvis saw in Ozzy that gave him hope. Ozzy had something Elvis never had. Elvis was naturally charismatic, naturally likable. When he smiled, America melted. That made it easy for them to soften his edges, to turn him into something safe. Ozzy didn't have that problem. Ozzy was inherently uncomfortable, inherently threatening. Nobody was ever going to turn Ozzy Osbourne into a family-friendly entertainer. His darkness was his protection. "Your weakness is your strength," Elvis told him. "The thing that makes you an outsider is the thing that's going to keep you honest. Don't ever try to be me, son. Be the version of this that I never had the courage to be." That conversation planted a seed in Ozzy's mind that would define his entire approach to fame, success, and survival in the music industry. But Elvis's advice came with a warning that Ozzy wouldn't fully understand until it almost destroyed him. Because there's a difference between being authentic and being self-destructive. And Ozzy was about to learn that difference the hard way. Elvis's advice to Ozzy wasn't about music, it was about survival. And what he taught Ozzy that night would become the foundation of everything that made Ozzy Osbourne legendary. But it would also nearly kill him. "The secret," Elvis had said, "is that the audience doesn't want perfection. They want connection. And the only way to truly connect is to show them your scars." Elvis understood something that most performers never figure out. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's power. When Elvis would break down crying during "Are You Lonesome Tonight?", when his voice would crack with genuine emotion, those weren't mistakes. Those were the moments that made him immortal. But here's what Elvis couldn't have predicted. Ozzy would take that lesson and push it to its absolute extreme. After that meeting, Ozzy became obsessed with Elvis's concept of emotional honesty. But while Elvis had learned to channel his pain into his performances, Ozzy decided to live his pain in public. He turned his entire existence into performance art. The biting the head off the bat? That wasn't just shock value. That was Ozzy showing the world that he was willing to go places other performers wouldn't dare. The excessive drinking, the drug abuse, the outrageous behavior. Ozzy convinced himself this was all part of being authentic, the way Elvis taught him. Elvis had meant, show them your vulnerability through your art. Ozzy interpreted it as, Show them your vulnerability by destroying yourself in front of them. And for a while, it worked. Ozzy's solo career exploded because audiences had never seen anything like it. Here was a performer who held nothing back, who was willing to be completely, dangerously real. No pretense, no safety net, no limits. But there's a crucial difference between what Elvis did and what Ozzy was doing. Elvis used his pain as fuel for his performances, but he tried to keep some part of himself separate, protected. Ozzy erased that boundary completely. He became the performance. Elvis had warned him about this, actually. The trick, he'd said, is knowing where the performer ends and the person begins. You lose that line, and the stage will eat you alive. Ozzy lost that line completely. By the early 1980s, he wasn't just performing as the Prince of Darkness. He was becoming the Prince of Darkness. The drinking wasn't just for show. It was survival. The outrageous behavior wasn't calculated. It was compulsive. He was drowning in his own authenticity. The turning point came in 1982, when Ozzy woke up in jail, charged with urinating on the Alamo. He had no memory of doing it. He had no memory of the previous 3 days. And that's when he realized that Elvis's advice had become a trap. Elvis had taught him that audiences connect with pain, with vulnerability, with truth. But Ozzy had misunderstood the most important part. You have to survive long enough to keep sharing that truth. Elvis himself had fallen into the same trap. By 1977, Elvis was so committed to giving his audience everything, every emotion, every piece of himself, that there was nothing left for Elvis the person. The performance had consumed the man. Ozzy was heading down the exact same path, and he knew it. But here's where Ozzy proved he was stronger than Elvis ever was. Elvis never found a way to step back from the edge. He kept giving and giving until there was nothing left to give. Ozzy realized that true authenticity wasn't about destroying yourself for your audience. It was about being honest about your struggle to survive. The real transformation happened when Ozzy stopped trying to be Elvis's version of authentic and started being his own version. He got clean. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to function. He married Sharon, who became his anchor to reality. He learned to separate Ozzy the performer from John the husband and father. Most importantly, he learned that the audience didn't need him to die for their entertainment. They needed him to live through his struggles and show them how to do the same. This is why Ozzy's career lasted 50 years while so many other authentic performers burned out in 5. Elvis's advice taught him that connection comes from vulnerability. But Ozzy's own experience taught him that vulnerability without self-preservation is just suicide with an audience. The final lesson, the one Elvis never learned, was that the greatest authenticity isn't showing people how you fall apart. It's showing them how you put yourself back together. Elvis had given Ozzy the key to connecting with audiences on the deepest possible level. But Ozzy had to figure out on his own how to use that key without destroying himself in the process. By the 1990s, when Ozzy was doing the Osbournes, he'd finally mastered what Elvis had been trying to teach him. He was completely, authentically himself, flawed, struggling, human. But he was alive to share it. Elvis had shown him the power of emotional honesty. Ozzy had learned the wisdom of emotional survival. And that combination, Elvis's raw connection with Ozzy's endurance, created something the music world had never seen before and will never see again. But the most shocking revelation of all was still to come. Here's the shocking truth that changes everything we thought we knew about both Elvis Presley and Ozzy Osbourne. That 20-minute conversation in 1972 didn't just influence Ozzy's career. It completed a revolution that Elvis had started but could never finish. Elvis Presley broke the first barrier in popular music, the barrier between performer and audience. Before Elvis, entertainers were supposed to be polished, distant, untouchable. They sang pretty songs about pretty things, and they kept their real selves locked away behind professional masks. Elvis shattered that wall. When he gyrated his hips, when his voice cracked with emotion, when he let his vulnerability show, he was telling audiences, "I'm not performing at you, I'm sharing with you. I'm not above you, I'm one of you." But Elvis was trapped by his own success. The more famous he became, the more isolated he became. He'd broken down the wall between performer and audience, but he'd built an even higher wall around himself. The man who taught the world about emotional connection became the loneliest person on the planet. That's where Ozzy comes in. That's the completion of the revolution. Ozzy took Elvis's breakthrough, authentic, emotional connection, and solved the problem Elvis couldn't solve. How do you maintain that connection without destroying yourself? How do you stay vulnerable without becoming a victim of your own vulnerability? The answer was something neither of them could have imagined in 1972. You don't just share your pain, you share your recovery. You don't just show people how you fall, you show them how you get back up. This is why Ozzy's influence on rock music is actually more profound than Elvis's influence on popular music. Elvis showed performers they could be human. Ozzy showed them they could be human and survive it. Think about every rock star who came after Ozzy, from Kurt Cobain to Chester Bennington to any modern artist struggling with mental health in public. They're all following the template that began with Elvis teaching Ozzy about authenticity, and Ozzy learning how to make that authenticity sustainable. Elvis broke the mold of the perfect performer. Ozzy broke the mold of the doomed performer. Before Ozzy, the narrative was simple. If you're going to be truly authentic as an artist, if you're going to bare your soul completely, you're probably going to die young. Look at Elvis. Look at Jimi Hendrix. Look at Janis Joplin. Authenticity equals destruction. Ozzy proved that wrong. He showed that you can be completely, brutally honest about your struggles and still build a life. Still maintain relationships, still be there for your family, still have a career that spans decades. The real shock isn't that Elvis influenced Ozzy, it's that Ozzy completed what Elvis started. Elvis gave us permission to be vulnerable. Ozzy gave us permission to survive our vulnerability. This is why Ozzy's career outlasted almost every other rock star of his generation. It's not because he was more talented, though he was incredibly talented. It's not because he was smarter about business, though Sharon certainly was. It's because he figured out the secret that Elvis died trying to learn. You can be authentic without being self-destructive. You can share your darkness without being consumed by it. You can connect with people through your pain without drowning in it. Every time you see a modern artist talking openly about therapy, about sobriety, about mental health struggles, they're walking a path that began with Elvis teaching Ozzy about emotional honesty, and Ozzy learning how to make that honesty a source of strength instead of destruction. The conversation between Elvis and Ozzy wasn't just about two musicians meeting. It was about the moment when rock and roll learned how to grow up, how to be dangerous and safe at the same time, how to be revolutionary and responsible. Elvis started the revolution. Ozzy finished it. Without that meeting, without Elvis seeing something in Ozzy that even Ozzy didn't see, modern rock music doesn't exist. The entire concept of authentic performance, sharing your real struggles, your real emotions, your real humanity with your audience, that all traces back to a conversation between a dying king and a future prince in a dressing room in 1972. Elvis gave Ozzy the keys to the kingdom, but Ozzy rebuilt the kingdom so that future kings could actually survive ruling it. That's not just influence, that's evolution. That scruffy kid from Birmingham didn't just learn from the king of rock and roll. He saved rock and roll from the king's tragic fate. And that's the real reason Elvis Presley was Ozzy Osbourne's biggest inspiration. Because Elvis showed him not just how to be a star, but how not to die like one. This hidden connection changed rock history forever. What other secret influences shaped your favorite artists? Drop your theories in the comments, and if this blew your mind, smash that subscribe button for more untold stories that will change how you see music legends.